So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ilan, and I'm the head of operations here at My Medicine Australia. We are thrilled to have Dr. Mario, who's been a huge supporter of our work from day dot, and also Mason has been an amazing supporter behind the scenes mainly. And Nicole, my colleague, will give us an intro to them briefly later. But I just wanted to give everybody just a 5-minute overview as to the work that we do over here. So today's session is about the preparation for embodied and integrated healing with plant medicines. Also, just a note that this session is also going to be recorded and available on our YouTube channel. Now, just a brief overview as to the mental health stats at the moment. So we know that approximately 1 in 5 Australians have got a chronic mental health condition, and that was pre-COVID. And also, sadly, 1 in 7 Australians are now on antidepressants. So therefore, there is sadly a massive cost to the human life and potential, and there's an enormous cost to society. And as we've seen over the last 50 years or so, governments and peak body bureaucrats are just resistant to change. There's been no innovation in trying to solve the issues causing mental illness, or even to help the trauma that people have got. And then with current pharmacotherapies, we have seen, sadly, that depression only has got a 35% remission rate. Conditions like PTSD are even lower at 10%. Addiction and also eating disorders are two main concerns as well. And Mario can tell us that many fabulous people sadly are just lacking the tools from a practitioner point of view, and also patients just don't have the tool to get themselves better. So 5 years ago came along My Medicine Australia, and our aim as a charity is to change the mental health system, I guess, from the root core. Our primary focus is on bringing psychedelic therapies to the masses and to help those people who do need them. Our focus at the moment is on psilocybin, MDMA, and also ketamine. And we are measuring our success on 3 main factors. Number 1 is that these treatments should be part and parcel of the mental health system. We absolutely want to see an improvement to the remission rates, which I mentioned before. And we also want these treatments to become accessible and affordable to everybody. And our 4 pillars, which I guess define who we are and also why we come to work every single day, revolve around these 4 core activities. There's number 1, just awareness and also knowledge building. So these sessions, which Mason and Mario are doing, are just fantastic. We do have a professional development program, which is a 4-month, 90-hour course for practitioners. Mario has actually completed the CPAP program, and he can speak about that as well. We are looking at patient access, on giving people access to psilocybin and also MDMA. And we also are funding current clinical trials around the country as well. And a huge part of our work was that we helped to ensure that Australia became the first country in the world to actually legalize MDMA and also psilocybin therapy. And now, I was telling Mario before that now the next phase is probably harder than the first phase, because now we actually have to work out on the rollout of these therapies. Just a brief overview as to what this actually means. So the TGA's ruling is that patients who have been diagnosed with treatment-resistant depression can get access to psilocybin therapy, and patients who've got PTSD can get access to MDMA therapy. The medicines are prescribable by a psychiatrist, and depending on which state you're in, it also influences as to how the therapies are done, whether it's done inside their rooms or whether it's done inside a hospital setting. But that's all being ironed out at the moment. But overall, we are looking at a patient having 1 to 3 dosing sessions together with psychotherapy as well. And also psychiatrists have to become authorized prescribers as well. So that's them going through ethics and then getting approval from the TGA as well. just briefly, we do have some upcoming events as well. So our next webinar is going to be in about 3 weeks' time on the 10th of October with Ali Bainar, who in fact is the founder of the Breaking Convention conference in the UK. So that's just phenomenal if you want to join us for that one. And then Dr. Ben Sessa, who's a psychiatrist from the UK, is coming out for an in-person tour at the end of the year. And then we're finishing off the year with a session by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk and also Gita Vade, and finally with Gabor Mate, who is a celebrity in his own right as well. So please do sign up for these sessions. They are free, and you are welcome to donate donate and support our cause during the time of booking. So without further ado, I'm going to pass on to Nicole if you want to introduce Mario and Mason, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Ilan. And as Ilan just said, our presenters today are two very close friends of Mind Medicine Australia, Mason Taylor and Dr. Mario Alam. And they will be in conversation and doing a presentation on the focus of physical and mental health practices for life in general and in preparation for psychedelic-assisted treatments. So Dr. Mario Alam, I will just sort of read from his bio, but he advocates and embodies a whole picture approach to health. He marries his professional skills in Western medicine with wisdom and knowledge gained from his personal interactions with spiritual elders, shamans, and medical pioneers across the world. So in that he's travelled to over 50 countries and gaining unique insights into the human condition. So Dr. Mario has a signature program called Reset, which is a breakthrough program to prepare and integrate psychedelic medicines and effectively provide holistic solutions to the healing of trauma, which is really relevant, obviously, based in Byron Bay. So he's well loved by his patients, I hear, and he's got a deep intuitive presence and a passion for the community. So we really welcome Dr. Mario today, and also being a graduate of our first course of Mind Medicine Australia's Certificate of Psychedelic-Assisted Therapy. So he's a really good advocate for us, and he may have, if you've got questions later, we've got the hand press button. You can certainly ask lots of questions about their presentation and about the course. And then just to welcome Mason Taylor, who is certainly no stranger also to Mind Medicine Australia. He's been with us virtually from the start as a supporter with products as well as education. Mason Taylor is a wellness educator, host, and actually a host of the Mason Taylor podcast show, which many of you will have seen and be aware of, professional speaker and retreat facilitator. So Mason's a passionate tonic herbalist, and that's his specialty, obviously. He's the founder of Australia's leading tonic herb and medicinal mushroom provider, Superfeast. He's dedicated to teaching people from all walks of life how to embrace and benefit from the healing forces of nature. So that's a really important part of his presentation, and also Dr. Mario's, of course. Mason is focusing on creating a unique and dynamic health philosophy and also a long and happy life, which is his intention. As I mentioned, Mason's relationship with Mind Medicine Australia is an educator and partner of amazing Superfeast products. You'll also find them on our Mind Medicine Australia partner page with a product discount code. So there is an MMA discount code, so you can actually purchase the products as well. And if you come to any of our live events, or you've been lucky enough to receive a gift bag with Superfeast products, make sure you come along to our next live event at Ben Sessa in Melbourne, and potentially in Canberra, and you'll get some products. But no more on that. Preparation for embodied and integrated healing with plant medicines, over to Mason and Dr. Mario. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you. Good to be in space with you, Mason, again.
Yeah, likewise. More of this, please.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll bring up a presentation we prepared earlier. I just want to say thank you for everybody for making this time and space available today to be here. It's a Thursday afternoon, and wherever you are, I hope you're in a comfortable place with a cup of water, and you find yourself remembering to take a breath to land into where we are now. I'd like to just kind of start off by just acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. And I'd like to pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. Mason, I felt just to kind of share a bit about the talk today and why we're here today from both our perspectives, because I know you provide a very unique insight from the Taoist philosophy and also from your own personal experiences and your understanding through the medicines that come through. Did you want to start sharing, talk about what inspires you about this topic and what you'd like to focus on?
Yeah, I'll be nice and succinct, everyone, because there's a lot to cover. But in terms of what's given me the honor to talk to you all today, especially talking to practitioners when I'm what I call a scallywag herbalist. I'm a decentralized and non-clinical herbalist or practitioner, and that's part of the reason why I'm here today and why that's the realm that I live in is outside of intense treatment when there is intense symptomology, whether it's physical or mental, and looking at essentially a wisdom tradition or a map that translates really nicely and as easily as possible, and that can integrate into modern institutions of healing and into modern society with relevance so that we can gain some terminology that's perhaps needed outside of reductionist terminology, which is very necessary, and I love even in the realm of like modern medicine, psychology, modern Chinese medicine, so on and so forth. It gets really reductionist. That's not really that useful in the long run when we are going through our long-term integration and also when we are preparing to go into these treatments. So as Mario said, I've kind of fallen in love, or Taoism fell in love with superfeast is probably the way that I can probably put it, and especially Taoist tonic herbalism, very ancient philosophy for living, evolving and growing. And there's a lot of context there that helps us get to the bottom of, essentially what are we trying to do here? With like, why are we trying to heal? Yes, focusing on the pain point is necessary, but as I've got a lot of empathy with practitioners of at what point how do you support people to prepare so well that they are already coming through the treatment and you know when to put the boundaries in at the most appropriate time, so that reliance on the medicines and on institutions and on clinic aren't necessary, and people can start really standing on their own 2 feet and maneuver towards long term what it is that they're trying to do. So that's why I've been invited, and I will just inquire: is there anyone who can tell whether it's them that's getting a little speaking in the background? I've just got. I can just hear some voices coming through. So if that is you, let us know. Otherwise, yeah, that's me, Mario.
Thank you, Mason. Thank you. I share those experiences in terms of we were coming at a time when the journey into psychedelics. So we're finding that it's become legalized, but it's been part of the terrain for a long time now, and people have been engaging with them both in the ground, but also the now above ground scene, which we're here to promote the above ground, but realizing that people are humans and are going to probably engage in their own experiences of the medicines, and how do we actually equip ourselves individually and as a collective for that transformation that's occurring at the moment with the medicines. For myself, I've been pretty privileged to be part of a community in Mullumbimby, in the Northern Rivers, in Ashara, Byron Bay, where there's been a large movement for decades in terms of the conscious movements through psychedelics, and as a result, there's been a already ingrained community of people who have done the work for embodiment, for integration. There's a lot of practitioners, a lot of facilities, a lot of modalities that have been birthed in that area, and a lot of workshops happening that are helping to support the nervous system, helping support and navigate the individual to find the wisdom of that psychedelics into their embodiment. And as a doctor in the community, having explored being in Western medicine, explored psychosomatic medicine, energy medicine, having done hundreds of workshops and developed my own programs for psychedelic integration through that. What I really want to highlight is the things that I've learned from working within this community that I think will be able to support people out there, which I can attest, probably you, both of us, Mason, being part of this community, it's given us a lot of insights as to that community development that is required also for the integration. And so what I've learned is how to marry the aspects of what comes through the Western medicine with that comes through more the philosophical and esoteric, but also now coming into the groundedness of what we're awakening, what the psychedelics are looking to embody. So I'm really excited to be sharing this space with you, Mason, exploring this conversation. I wanted to kind of just bring a bit lighthearted from at the beginning with the because given Australia is now the first country in the world to legalize psychedelics, it's not new, the use of psychedelics in the Australian terrain. I've just recently been at a festival called Mushroom Valley, which given your work with mushrooms, I thought I would see you there, Mason. I did try to bring you up here. It was a really amazing festival, and it was focused around the culture of art and music and dance, but there's also inherently an underground psychedelic culture that exists in these festivals, whether it be Earth Frequency or Mushroom Valley or Dragon Dreaming, or a lot of festivals that are now birthing. And so people are already engaging in this practice on a regular basis, but you can also see kids in these spaces are really allowed to express their joy. And what I really loved is the freedom of expression and creativity that was birthed through my daughter in some of these pictures that are here. And but the work for integration is not something that we really yet had a handle on in terms of the embodiment. It's happening in different circles, but I really am in support and advocate for how do we ground the wisdom that gets awakened to psychedelics, because it's already happening. It's just a matter of now, how do we marry the movement as it's coming through? And so I wanted to ask you, Mason, what comes up for you in the aspect of like, how do we find our way through the current paradigm? Because we've got now 2,000 years of patriarchy, where it's been more connected more to the higher realms, or more to the mental aspects, whereas now we're being called to come back into the body. And so how do we, with all the trauma that's been caught up in our body systems or our mental constructs, how do we find our way through from your perspective?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, we've discussed a lot about, like, I'm fascinated with your what you offer. It's so specific to embodiment, which is when we're going to be talking about integration, we're going to start with the body. And as a lot of us have kind of come around to, it feels like less of an ascension model, which is relevant than a descension model, and a real coming back down and coming into the center of ourselves. So when it comes to what I'm going to be talking about today and bringing in the relevance of the three treasures. So the three treasures, and if anyone has got chatter in the background again, can we go back to the muting? That would be awesome. What we're essentially looking at when we look at the three treasures of Taoism are the three treasured aspects of the body that if we can keep them protected then and cultivating, then we're going to have the capacity to move towards the elder years of our lives, integrated. Because this is something that I think what we're focusing on now, and by looking at the body, we're not focusing on the capacity for whether it's a patient or our community or ourselves as practitioners and scallywag practitioners. We're not looking at our ability to integrate one experience. What a more useful focus is cultivating the capacity to embody the skill of integration across the lifetime of the person who's who's in front of you. And I know for me, that's been quite transformational, and that's been enabled. I've been enabled to do that by staying outside of clinic and remembering, yes, it's very important for you guys when you've got a patient in front of you to be going reductionist and looking at this integration because it's so important. So I'm not saying that's not important at all. But once it does get to that point where you know that they're stepping out and you want to give them every skill that, that they can possibly have to ensure that they don't just come back in chasing the same cathartic experience again, just running around chasing the tail of the same emotion or suppressed memory or whatever it is that's coming up, is reminding them that, or getting your own language and talking about what integration is and what the experience is, and how that, yes, the big integrations are great, but what do the little mini integrations look like across decades? And it's that chop wood, carry water that is going, it involves acceptance, it involves just sitting in silence and feeling your body. It's actually having the body being strong and supple enough that it can handle the embodiment of the spirit which you are trying to express, which a lot of the time trauma is in the way of. And that takes you focusing on the body and focusing on practices that are going to literally make it strong enough so it can hold the blood. In Taoism, blood is what our Shen, our spirit, our purposefulness, and our capacity for love and expressing that, and our wisdom is put in through the blood so that the blood can circulate through the body. And that's how in Taoism you develop a real sovereign mind. And so you're going to have to call a spade when people are in front of you, that if they've really neglected their physical capacity, which is their jing, which is their potential. So it's their potential to not degenerate and their potential to heal. There's going to have to be a point where you at least call it out and say, this is what I'm going to recommend. And it's really nice as practitioners, I think, to start, and it'll happen as integration of institutions come, and integration of what's good lifestyle medicine versus what's good clinical medicine. But as practitioners, for you to really start feeling that boundary where you're like, I'm actually going to tell you, you're not going to progress any further unless you address this in your body and really put that up, and so that people can feel the weight of that, because people won't be willing to, and willingness is the je, it's the spirit of the kidneys, and the kidneys is where our jing lives, our potential. They won't feel the willingness to keep on going and developing their jing capacity if you're not allowing them to feel the weight of just how much is on the line, gently and appropriately. And yeah, that's what I'm feeling when you're talking about embodiment and finding our way.
Thank you, Mason. And to add to that, I find the kidneys are really, really important in this space where, with the because I really love the Superfeast products, and I refer them to my patients all the time. With the jing, it specifically kind of supports your adrenals and your kidneys, which, if we look at the embodiment aspect of ourselves, they're the areas in our lower backs, which is often the area that we give the least amount of attention and awareness to. But if we look at the development of ourselves, we often we traverse up in our consciousness in our bodies, whereas when we take a slow deep breath, we actually allow ourselves to drop into the body a lot deeper. But the area that we give the least amount of attention to is our lower backs, and I'm sure there are many out there that are experiencing lower back pain, and it's often that disconnect from the body, which supporting it through different means, such as with things that support the jing of the body, supporting movements to help them to come back into that awareness of the body, will help to reduce that lower back pain and help them to navigate that fluidity in their system. Does that sound resonant?
Yeah, great point. Yeah.
One of the things I'm going to try to do as well, I'm going to try and marry the Taoist philosophies with the Western, to try to see, because we haven't done this before. So let's explore how this interplay comes out today, Mason. I'm excited about it.
And it is fun. And just remember, everyone, when we do this, we're not trying to layer them over exactly. We've talked about this, Mari and I, but it's like putting Mandarin and English and expecting them to line up exactly. That doesn't happen. But as you talk about them at the same time, you feel the little connection points, and all of a sudden it gives greater context to each of them, and creates a beautiful harmony, yin yang.
Yeah. And just finding our way, like one of the things is that because of all the debris that from the Western point of view, I see the amount of weight of emotions that are stored both in the mind but also in the body, often that becomes the constructs through which we perceive the world. And so how do we actually find our ways actually to connect to a deeper part of ourselves, from that deeper part to actually sense our future, sense our past, and realign that energetically within that internal system based connected to a deeper part of ourselves, rather than connecting to the external sources that have been conditioned or programmed throughout our upbringing. And so I really like how Mason talked about the aspects of the little steps along the way for the integration. And so why I put this image here in Taoism is that aspect of the balance that occurs, the yin, the yang, which I really like, because it's my understanding is that the white represents the yin, and when the yin is strong, then there's always space for the strong of the yang. Oh, sorry, it's a yang, and the black is the yang, where when the yang is in strong strength, there's always space for the strength of the yin in there. And what I find in terms of the balance from the Western point of view is that the right and left side of the brain, our right side being more the creative, and our connection more to the feminine constructs of our being, more the creative flow, and the left side more the analytical, which is depicted there in the picture, which connects to the right side of our body. And you can see it there in the picture on the right hand side. I wanted to depict also that aspect of you seeing the right, the one facing us, but on the right, the light field one, the feminine more grounded to the earth elements, and the masculine more connected to the high elements, which is what we had for the last 2,000 years of more the patriarchal systems. We're now coming more into the matriarchal and the connection back into the earth and the embodiment. So one of the things that Mason talked about is the concept of ground, transform, and expand in the journey of understanding how do you traverse the integration point. And so how do we first ground ourselves in? Because it's grounding ourselves with being with real, with what's here at this physical realm, that we allows them the safety to transform. And we'll go through what that transformation stage looks like. So then ultimately is, well, we come into our higher awareness, the consciousness to expand, and awakening that inner space within ourselves, which often the psychedelics will be doing, is resetting that microbiome of our consciousness, that our default mode network, which is our default system, that's been default as a result of our conditionings and programmings. And so when we reset that, what are we actually allowing that newness to expand into our system? I'm really excited to see how we both explore that in this conversation. So we start off with ground. I felt to start with sharing this, as you ground in, before you entering into the psychedelic journey and engaging with the psychedelic journey, it's really important to really understand, well, first of all, how do you ground yourself here in this physical realm, so that you feel safe? Because ultimately, when a psychedelic is going to be activated in the system, a lot of traumas are going to arise, a lot of disconnects is going to happen from the mind, body, but ultimately bring you back to connection. But that sense of safety is something that's inherited in the individual. Now, as we talked about before with Mason, is that the body experiences where it's held in the kidneys and the adrenals. How do we bring that safety into the body? What are some ways that you feel would be able to bring that in, Mason?
Yeah, and this is why I want to reiterate here, like, I'm very aware in terms of preparation for coming in. So we'll talk about both preparation, pre and post treatment. But when it comes to prep, a lot of practitioners are still just going like, of course, I kind of generally recommend you to do some good general exercise and some supportive foods and make some suggestions. I really want to I've come across a few practitioners, and I really agree that I think it's time for a little bit of an up-leveling in terms of the level of conviction and facilitation of people preparing. This is what I'm going to require of you, and really and just reiterate to the patient just how proud you are of them to making this choice, that they're in the right place. Really, those initial communications been like, but now you're on, and go a little bit further into recommending these things. Now, of course, some people are going to be so traumatized that they're not going to be able to do any of this because it's not safe for them to start even bringing stuff up. Acknowledge that. The majority of the time, if people are at the ground level, you find out if they are doing regular exercise. And so that doesn't need to be any kind of exercise like yoga that's actually going to be doing some of the second tier that we're going to talk about, which is around the chi and the transformation. That's like yoga, but it could be just Pilates, regular gym, regular cardio. And then when you get to like the foods, is your leaning on like a whatever floats your boat, whether it's like Ayurvedic or Chinese food therapy, that is going to be transformational for people because they're going to walk in with groundedness. Likewise, in tonic herbalism, bringing in Jing tonic herbs or ashwagandha from from the Ayurvedic Rasayanas, and there's many other Jing herbs, but they're going to come in not walking on eggshells within their endocrine and nervous system through doing these things. So their capacity to really feel and embody what happens and not forget it, not have to try and remember the experience of their mind, but the capacity for their body to remember what's come up, and to nail the distinction point that, oh, that's where this is how I actually feel, and to be able to hold it and feel it long enough that they even get past the placebo of, was that real? Is that really how I feel? It's going to make it so much more effective if they come in grounded in that sense. And likewise, as you said, like anything for the nervous system, and that could be as simple as saying, you have to go for a walk through nature before coming to me, at the very minimum, with, you know, going on walkabout, just to start that process. So that's just what I want to say there, in terms of, as we go along, you will be able to assess if someone doesn't have grounding, then that's where you start. But if you find you got someone relatively healthy and they're like, okay, grounding, and then I'll get to it when we get there, but, you know, now, do you have any of these practices in that are helping you move your emotions or cultivate qi, like in qigong, so on and so forth? And if it's a no, then you sit there. And then if they do have those, or if you find that they're all talking about emotion in transpersonal therapy or something like that, and they've got no grounding, then you go back and you plug grounding in first. And then finally, if they've got those nailed, then you can help them to come in prepared by looking at the expansion, which is the Shen. So yeah, I think I stayed relevant there.
Yeah, no, that's great. And it comes back to that safety, is feeling safe in your body. Because if you look at a little baby, when you hold a little baby, they often will say the closest thing to pure energy. But when you put your hands, I don't know if with my daughter, when you put your hand to her lower back, to her bottom, she feels safe. And it's the same thing as adults, is when we give that awareness and that attention to that lower back and that lower part of our body to feel safe, and how do we cultivate that safety? And I find, like, you know, I think I agree with you, Mason, in terms of the foods and the practices that are there, but also would be inviting the aspect of, from the psychological point of view, the intention around what they're stepping into. Because I find when they have often people will set an intention that's quite high up in the air and unrealistic, but setting some clear intention that are grounded, for example, in terms of their health, their emotions, relationships, finances, business, spirituality, sexuality. So having a bit of a map of what there it is they're going to be stepping into, because the constructs of the past will try to contract a person from the constructs of what they experience. And so creating a container for them to step into allows them to thaw out of their old patterns of behavior, because the psychedelics will help to transform that inner terrain, but having the intention of what is it they're going to be stepping into. So, for example, you're out there, like, what intention do you have for your health? What do you have intention for your relationships, for your finances? Because if somebody doesn't feel safe in their finances, then that in itself can cause an inability to feel safe. Or if the person hasn't cultivated their sexuality or their business, then they come out of the psychedelic journey still with that same problem. So giving yourself a containership that's grounded for you to step into from the journey, I find is really important, and not to over expand it, but just give it something that's actually plausible and grounded.
You've touched on something, that word intention. Look, my mum's currently going through some psychedelic therapy, as well as getting some classical Chinese medicine, acupuncture, at the same time. And the thing I enjoy the most about working with mind medicine practitioners like yourself, Ariel, and classical Chinese medicine, is because there's only one context that's important, and that's not to just heal, but to, in terms of the acupuncturist, he said, your mum is going to go far, because when I feel what's there, her spirit is strong. So she's got a lot of willingness, and she can feel her intention. So a lot of people they don't come in blessed like my mum is. She's already got it. So they're like, great, we don't have to bring that in because your spirit is so strong and you've got that capacity, that desire. Physically, she's got tenacity to an extent, but it doesn't matter. Her Shen, that transformation space, that's delivering the tenacity and the go ahead and the stamina that her body maybe can't really, like drum up, but nonetheless it's there. And that's the only reason when you go into like, okay, well, what's the real intention long term here? You have for her, it's for her mobility. She's post 11 years past stroke, and so debilitated, brain injury, half her skull taken off, right side no mobility, right side aphasia. So it's like speech, dare to dream that I might be able to communicate, so on and so forth. Now you going to mental construct, I think that's a huge one around safety, is just opening up that space for being like, what are we doing here? And take them as far as their capacity can go in terms of like staying grounded within the spirit, where they're really remaining like impacted and moved by what they're saying. Of course, people are scared to dream, and sometimes people don't want to hope. And so being mindful of that if they might try and fool themselves and go beyond and now, but just really looking, wording it exactly as you say. You ask enough places, and what are you looking for in business or in sexuality or in spirituality? It's so amazing because it brings up too much reality. Like business and money might be like, God, it's just so shit. And you can see that's tied to sexuality, and you can see that's tied to this. And so what do you want? And so it crumbles the construct, and they're like, I just want to feel myself having the capacity to contribute, to be a beautiful member of the community, to experience joy. And you go bang, bang, and you just hone in on that, because that's the spirit that's maybe that they're not touching, which is going to give them context to go deep and actually follow the map. Because people don't know the map. That's why I like Taoism. It's why I like these ancient traditions, why I like institutions. But I like integrated institutions even more, because the map becomes really clear. That's like, that's enough of grounding for you now. You really need to start entering into this over here. Or likewise, the map's going to be useless unless you have a North Star. So let's stop beating around the bush of like, what's you chasing happiness and so on and so forth, and let's get to the bottom of it. So really important going through this.
Yep, no, I agreed, and it gives them permission to step out of their old patterns of programming, because it's said that it takes, because with a lot of like things like psilocybin, they'll increases the neuroplasticity in the brain. But if it doesn't have a way to create new pathways, then it will repattern itself into old patterns, which makes it almost ineffective. And that's where the integration comes in. Because it's said that it takes 3 to 80 days for the brain to rewire itself from an old pattern. But that involves active reprogramming. It just doesn't happen by itself. You need to give it direction to create a new pathway, a new mycelium of connectivity.
Beautiful.
And so with that, I want to also, as we mentioned, having a daily practice, whatever it is having something that daily helps you to come back into your body, finding that particular one for yourself that somebody finds out there, whether it be yoga or Pilates or Qigong, great modalities. I wanted to refer to the vagal and nerve toning in addition to that, because in terms of the nervous system regulation, often what creates that flight-fight response, that disconnect, is if the vagal nerve, which is often centralized around here, it supports the whole autonomic nervous system, but also helps the activation of the parasympathetic system. But in flight-fight response, where the person comes into their head, that becomes hypervigilant and hyperreactive. And so calming down that system also allows them to allow things to drop out of the head disconnect, to drop back into the body and the parasympathetic system. And so things such as pranayamas like breath work, intermittent nostril breathing, Kriya yogas, connecting, giving somebody hug is co-regulation. So find somebody that you love out there and give them a hug on a regular basis. One of my joys every single morning with my daughter is I wake up every single morning and my daughter's there. The first thing she does, she comes and gives me a hug. I've anchored that in from the very beginning. We just stay there for minutes just co-regulating between the two of us. And we start the day in co-regulation. And that's such an important, vital calming of the nervous system. They find humming, singing, or gargling also activates the vagal nerve, allows the person to drop into the body further. Meditation and mindfulness allows the inner witness to observe rather than to react to the external. And I'm sure there's a lot more that you can share on that one. Yoga helps to stretch out the fascial planes in the body, and it's why I'm actually a really big fan of Pilates. Especially with vagal nerve, because speaking to the osteopaths and those that do craniosacral, which is a therapy where they connect to the cerebrospinal fluid and the nerves at the back of the spine to calm the vagal nerve, and it's such a light process, but allows the person to relax into parasympathetic. And what I hear from them craniosacrally is that when there's a lot of tension in the neck, whether it be neck stiffness or neck tightness or immobility around the neck, that causes pressure on the vagal nerve. But what's never talked about is how something like Pilates helps craniosacrally to activate the person's muscles to be in their body, so that they're able to uphold their body and their neck a lot more straight up. That puts less pressure onto the vagal nerve and allows that flow to move a lot easier in the individual, and allows the vagal nerve to relax, so it can help to regulate the nervous system and emotions and help a person drop into the body further.
Beautiful. Grounding's good. I mean, just remember, like, it was over 2,000 years ago, we get the first materia medica of herbalism, and it's called the Shendong Ben Sao Jing, and it says there, we take these herbs, the Jing herbs, and likewise you do the Jing practices, which is nutrition, being in rhythm with nature, the diet, being in rhythm with with your area, so on and so forth. These, rate the nervous system regulating practices, so that we don't age prematurely and degenerate prematurely, which is what you're seeing a lot of the time, is people entering into that death cycle when they're 50 and 60 and sometimes earlier. So the grounding aspect can become really lifestyle based, but that's one of those ones that if people are going to have a real hard time landing these insights, and which is okay. It's probably
Step by
yeah,
step
by step. It's probably better to bring it up, but then being very realistic that you're going to continue to be chasing, and you're going to stay in catharsis most likely without being able to land it, unless you can nail this.
And so the regular practices, just committed to the regular practices, regular work. I wanted to bring a mention in terms of if we look at on a slightly esoteric level, ourselves as an energy being that's here, and with the base represented by the red, the orange, sacral, the solar plexus, the heart, throat, third eye. A lot of cultures often explore this paradigm of energy work. But if we look at the wavelengths of light that is occurring alongside, it goes much faster as we go up higher along our energy systems. And why I bring this is to the aspect of the breath, which goes alongside this, where when we take a slower, deep breath, our wavelength also slows down, and we drop in deeper into our body. And if you look at little kids, where do little kids breathe from? You'll find that they'll breathe into their bellies naturally. Well, kids are more naturally embodied in their spirit, in who they are. And just watch their breath into their bellies. And just a reminder for us, so whenever you see a kid, remind yourself, be like a kid. They're amazing teachers. And slow down the deep on the breath. So on that note, I'm inviting everybody on the call to let's all just take a slow, deep breath to get into the belly. I know for myself, energy shifted out of my heart, and I felt a pop in my ear dropping down. So we're up to the transform. Was there anything on the ground before we go into the transform, Mason, you want to share?
No, feeling good.
Yeah. We're entering the transform stage, so that you go through grounding, because grounding continues before and afterwards. Continue the grounding process all the way through, and just keep that regular practice. When it comes to transform, it's like that muck in the middle. How do we clear all that density that's been accumulated? Because if we look at the chart on the left, we've got the prefrontal cortex, we've got the hypothalamus, pituitary, amygdala, hippocampus. Now, the frontal cortex is our rational thinking, how we rationalize our experience of the world. The amygdala and the hippocampus is our primitive part of our brain. It's an instinctual reflex. And for most people, that instinctual reflex, when they get triggered by an emotion, gets triggered, and that overrides the conscious part of the brain. And that activates the vagal nerve into sympathetic drive, and they can't actually rationalize what they're thinking. And I know with Chinese medicine, they talk about often organs and where the organs which stores emotions. So whether it be anger in the liver, you can see on the chart on the right, or whether it be sadness in the lungs, or fear in the kidneys, anxiety in the belly. So there's all this density that's accumulated in our system because of the disconnect of that trauma. Because if you leave a little kid by themselves without a adult to help nurture them and to thaw out their experience, they'll go into contraction. That trauma will get caught up in the system, and that becomes a patterned density which attaches itself in the physical body. And so how do we transform this middle part of the system? I wanted to just quickly make a mention of some amazing teachers and some amazing resources to educate yourself about. There's a book by Gabor Mate, who's doing a talk later in this year, on December 5th, called The Myth of Normal, which is phenomenal about teaching about the generational traumas, but also the aspect of how we've normalized pathology, rather than seeing ourselves out of this trauma response that's become now normalized. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk is a great resource of talking about how the body's storing that emotional memory. And Peter Levine talks about, with Waking the Tiger, talks about the somatic nature of our being, and how these nervous system regulation is actually somatically linked. And we're doing it all, we're focusing on just the psychology of our embodiment, but we forget about the somatic and that aspect of the felt sense that it helps us to regulate our nervous system between ourselves and each other. We are beyond this physical. There is this mycelium of energy that connects us and connects us all. And so this spider web of trauma that accumulates across our lifetime, how do we shift and transform that? If you look at psychedelics, such as psilocybin, the one on the left-hand side shows the functional MRI scans showing a brain on psilocybin, which has been compared to that of children. That's a natural state of our being when we're young. As we look at the placebo's got a lot less interconnectiveness across the system. And so we start to lose that connectivity if it's not being activated, it's not being connected, it's not being utilized. And so once like mycelium, it will reconnect neural fibers and help to reconnect to the physical body. MDMA will help to downregulate that stress response in the amygdala and the hippocampus to help a person to come back into their body. The psilocybin will reconnect the fibers to reconnect the somatic and the sensory in the body. And you find that I've seen many patients who have been and clients who have gone through their psychedelic journey. They often speak that they would twitch, and their bodies would twitch as reconnections start to occur, and these old things that are caught up in the body are released to ultimately allow that which lies within to start to thaw itself out, which will come to the expand stage. So in talking about transformation, I put a whole list of things there that are open for discussion. They're open to talk about. But did you want to share from a perspective what comes to life for you there, Mason?
Yeah, I mean, and this is where the most popular aspect of Chinese medicine and the most known word of Qigong comes in. Qigong and the other external practices, but likewise, yes, yoga, but especially the yin yoga. Look, I think I kind of split it into two areas. There are people who are just going to have a little bit of just stuck energy. And so you're going to find that with a little bit of yoga, a little bit of Pilates, a little bit of therapy, a little bit of creativity, all of a sudden the chi of the body, which transforms yin to yang. And so this is all that in traditional Chinese medicine, that's all it really is. It's not necessary. And I use the word blockage, and it's not necessarily, a blockage is one way you can put it, but it gets so much more nuanced, is that you've forgotten, the body's forgotten, or something's in the way, or you're lacking something that is going to support the chi to transform into the particular formation it's going to need to take on next. And that is generally going to be the juncture point of when yin goes to yang and yang goes to yin. I'm not going to go into it now, but as we move along and the integration between East and West is happening, you're going to actually find that grouped under the 5 elements, or the 5 transitions of the organ systems, heart, fire, kidney, water, so on and so forth, you're going to actually find that when they say kidney water, which is a particular formation of chi, and there's a particular formation of yin and yang chi as it transforms through yang water chi and yin water chi, you're actually going to find this is actually, they're going to find exactly how it relates to particular metabolic movements, particular endocrine functions, and particular cross-system communication and function. So you're going to be like, wow, that's what they meant by water. And it's going to be, I think, really emancipating for a lot of the Western practitioners who feel that split between just like, the shamanic practices of Chinese medicine and chi transformation, which is like, if you are trained classically and you have that shamanic capacity to be in your heart perception and feel the water of someone's body, which is a skill. Stephen Harrod Buhner teaches about that a lot. I believe Heart Math is doing a lot of that work and really quantifying what we're talking about with heart perception, not just something that we all talk about when we go to chanting circles in Mullumbimby because we're all hippie trippers. It's actually something which you can measure, and it's an important aspect for the practitioner. But what you will find there are some people who will shift really quickly, as they were like, my gosh, that MDMA just really opened it up, and now I feel like I can go along my way. But then there are those who are so backed up. It's either going to be because they've had so much trauma, or because their destiny is so huge and perhaps they're willing to engage with the destiny of where they need to go. Therefore, they're going to have to do a lot of sitting in the mud in order to have the right to weave towards that vision. Likewise, as I said, others are just very traumatized. So it's going to take a lot. So in the Tao, we say a lot of the time that's going to show up in what's called a damp spleen, because there's a lot to digest. And just going for one psilocybin MDMA journey on doing these practices, it's going to work to you're going to be able to pop your head up for a little bit and see where you need to go. And then your job is going to be going back down into the shit and sitting there for as long as it needs to take. And this is why Taoists will do something in preparation for this, or to strengthen their capacity to move through this phase, called fog walking. Because this isn't how it works every time, but for a lot of people in the West, it's what I'm finding. There's so much built up coming towards the spleen and stomach, and you don't have the capacity to transform it and digest what's happened in the past, or where you want to go and why you keep failing, and why you can't stop this character trait, and you essentially can't mobilize that emotion or mobilize that thought. And so we're on a loop. So we all, you guys are especially very, very well versed in that, and how it's useful to have those conversations. And likewise, just regular talking is often, when you're stuck in the mud, that's one of the most useful. That's the time when I've found it really useful in my life. But because there's so much water there, and it builds up, and you can't transform it, it start producing a steaming effect and a foggy effect. And so what that does is you stop being able to actually really know why you have hope. You might know theoretically you have hope, or that you have a vision, but you just can't really see it. You feel like you're trudging through a little bit blind. And what a great initiation for people. A lot of people unfortunately don't make it through that, but a lot of people do, and it's one of the most transformational times. And so that's where the practice of just keeping hold of a skerrick of the light through the trees, and that's quite often, I think, why we see such phenomenal results with psychedelic therapy, because people are so under the you know, they're just sometimes buried by the mud of what they need to digest and get through, that you know, any cathartic experience, especially, you know, sometimes we just need a plant medicine. Nothing else we have in our Western world is going to break through and get them seeing that light, and they go, oh my gosh, there it is. You know I can navigate towards that light again. But this is why the Taoists do fog walking, and they'd walk up into the hills and they'd walk through the fog very intentionally. They'd connect to their heart and they'd connect to their vision through the vision of their liver and the purposefulness and that the virtuousness of their heart. And they'd walk through the fog staying connected to that, because it's the biggest challenge when you are walking through the fog to stay connected to your heart and the reason and intention that you actually have. Why am I healing here? Why do I really want this? What kind of person do I really want to be when I'm 60, 70, or 80? You know, you need to get through the fog in order to really engage with that and refine it. But you got to earn that first. So a Taoist friend of mine talks about in the modern day, quite often what you can just do is go to like a Westfield shopping center at 3:30 in the afternoon, and that's like walking through the fog. And not to judge those places, but you can feel it's monotonous, right? Really just, and you can very quickly get sucked into that monotony. And I use that example, but you know, really you can watch for those patients that are in that. They've been pulled into that vibration, and they're believing the vibration of the fog, and they've lost, and because people lose their minds in those places. So anything, that's where it is really great for you to, yes, this is where I want you. It's very relevant for you to do ice baths, even though ice baths are naughty in Chinese medicine. During that phase, when you are lost, it's like, no, get in a couple of ice baths and remember you can do this. Likewise, some saunas, some qigong, just get it moving. Get into some psychosomatic therapy. Get talking to a therapist, to so on and so forth. You're in chop wood, carry water stage, and you just need to release the valve a little bit on that spleen, or through their in their head, in their trauma body, bit by bit, and they really need to get context for that, and they really need encouragement through that. That's what comes up for me within this chi transformation stage.
Thank you, Mason. There are a lot of resonance for me also, and I'm going to pretty come from a different point of view and challenge as well. Is that I think there's a lot of things that people can do. Like the breath work alone is quite effective. When I see people doing holotropic breathing, it activates not only the diaphragmatic breathing, but it helps to expel a lot of the emotions that are caught up stagnant in the system, because you're oxygenating the system. Things such as ice baths have been activates the adrenals, which I know it's controversial in Chinese medicine, but scientifically it's been also shown to be quite effective in terms of increasing dopamine, increasing body resilience, increasing energy levels, improving dopamine and serotonergic levels there also. So I think all these things are kind of little cheat ways to work with the transformation rather than depending on psychedelics. And nothing in alone, I feel, is sufficient. I think it's a combination of being engaged with that constant transformation within your own. And that's why the ground was to kind of anchor in the daily practice we do, but then the transformations constantly do the work to clear things that have been caught up in our childhood, growing up. And so often that memory is caught up in the fascia. So things like body work and fascial work will help to release that density, especially infrared also will help to. I've got one practitioner that I know who brings together body work massage, gets the infrared to activate the cellular detox pathways and helps the sweat to come out, and then gets cupping to move the energy around and pulls up the fascia to then move it again through massage to detoxify that trauma in the body, and then craniosacral to calm down the nervous system. And so all these things I think are really important. And with psychosomatic therapy, things like EMDR or somatic experiencing are the ones that I find have been the most beneficial in terms of therapeutic. Psychology in general is important, and a lot of the trained practitioners out there are psychologists, but it's very much a mental construct, doesn't have the connection to the somatic or the body's awareness and capacity to regulate itself it gives it kind of a mental safety, but not necessarily a physiological safety, which something like EMDR, rapid eye movement desensitization reprocessing, will help more so. And then ultimately is that allowing that creativity to come through. So we've got the masculine and the feminine constructs. So allowing the creativity to come through and allow that movement to flow through ultimately. And if you do a therapeutic, do some drawing afterwards to bring non-verbal understanding and integration of that. They found that the lot more information will come to you in the pre-verbal form of communication, like artistic expression, because it allows this deeper part to communicate without being hindered by conditioning and programming. So I employ people to utilize both the Chinese medicine constructs, because I think it's amazing in terms of moving flow and getting things moving the flow out of the organs with the 5 systems, but utilizing all the different things out there in unison, depending on the individual's where they're up to in their life and what their needs are at that point in time. But there's lots of resources out there, and I think I would really support people to kind of find what's their tool belt that they can work with, that's going to be helping their own transformation, rather than kind of looking at one particular thing. Should we go on to expand?
I believe so.
Yep. Because also running out of time as well. So the last, having grounded, then transformed the density, and ultimately is expanding. And then comes the question: what are we expanding? What are we tapping into? What are the psychedelics? What is our humanity trying to awaken? Do you want to share, Mason?
Yeah, and then I've referred to this as the Shen, and the major practices in any wisdom tradition is going to be stillness. And I think sometimes I do believe people underestimate the extent of which, yes, doing the external work, which still includes the Qigong, even though it's a part of internal alchemy. The real alchemy happens within the nothingness and the emptiness. And so when we talk about stillness practice, people will still say, yeah, it's like when I go out into nature and I walk through nature and I feel that emptiness. If we go really strict into Taoist practice, they'll be like, yes, like if we get into the semantics, of course it is, and there's a certain type of stillness. I'm not trying to but that practice of working through nature is still in that level of transform, because there's that symbiosis we see. Again, when science starts actually measuring what happens in walkabout, and it kind of has already to an extent with walking meditation through nature, there is a symbiosis between our HPA and amygdala, that enough repetition of looking at nature helps us pluck those traumas and those memories, and allows us to let them go, because it's just the way it works. And of course that's useful, but it's useful for the transformation. In terms of the expand, the Shen, where the actual cultivation starts to begin, that brings the actual, ironically, the North Star from the nothingness and the emptiness, it comes from pure stillness and stillness cultivation. And so I think everyone here has been around enough for yoga or Zen, that you'll be aware of why the data is showing that in that stillness, and there's many different forms of meditation, and in that, just as a big part of the is sitting in that stillness, is reflecting on what emerges, and doing that journaling and that clarifying, because the other aspect within the Tao is our vertical practice. So it's essentially external cultivation practices, internal, which is the pinnacle, is the stillness, and then the horizontal, which is the sleeping, because we rely on the sleep to be the time when we access the vision that we have. So when we figure out what's actually possible for our life, and create a vision for what's important to us, and then put that into reality, and then through this internal emptiness practice, we access the heart, and we actually go, right, that's the direction that we're going to go. This is how we're going to do it. This is this is what the Empress and the Emperor of the heart has dictated is the most important thing to us. So let's go. And that was what what any practitioner, and likewise within this type of work, I think it's, I feel like it's very important to not leave people who have the capacity to hear it disillusioned around the fact that this is going to be useful if they don't have some kind of engagement with what is going to expand them and their heart. And it doesn't even matter whether they're an atheist, it's the exact same kind of context of like something that you need your spirit to be involved in this. You need some kind of sense of purpose or something to engage with. And
how do you feel to tap into, what's the ways you find to tap into that space?
I'm reevaluating the map, the meditation, the breath work and meditation techniques and maps, and what I'm engaging with that allows me right now in this moment to maneuver to this place. It's always the same thing. I've always almost had to lay, not a trick, but I've always had to use breath work or use a mantra, or or have a vision that leads me into that place. And it's somatically at the moment is how I'm doing it, because whatever gets me into emptiness, the thing that I focus on that leads me towards emptiness is the thing that's needing the most context right now in order to move forward and integrate with where I'm at. So for me at the moment, it's been a lot about my masculinity. I know it's that. And when I was talking about that big sitting in the mud, for me, the big sitting in the mud is, when you get a real matzo ball of an issue that you're willing to transform, that's going to create an exponential leap in your development. And that's why I put so much weight to what I was talking about before. And that's where I'm at the moment. And that's where I sit. And it's the most harrowing to me, that part of me that is masculine and, penetrative and has strong conviction, and I've been petrified of it, and so that's where I start. I'll always start within my practice there, and then it's always the quickest way for me to move into nothingness, and at the same time, it's the quickest thing that gives my biggest tension and challenge at the moment, the context of why it's worth me going for it and engaging with it.
Thank you, Mason. And it really resonates for me when you say that tension point is one of the key things to drop into that it's that emptiness, that nothingness. And in my therapeutics, when I take people through journeys, I call it the crack. I find that tension point is a crack through which, when we crack that open, it allows the light to penetrate through. And what I find is that tension point often is an emotion that lies underneath it, that permeates the system. When we break through that, another one will often arise. And when we allow that to completely embody, the break through it, then there'll be another one that arises. And I find the deeper we go through the layers of the embodiment and awareness of those tension points, then that which has always been there arises naturally. In Western medicine, often Western constructs often talk about it as the void, the space of nothingness in that way, and where all can be created. Also, is that deep void. I don't know. Recently, in my dark meditation retreat, where for 3 days I didn't see a single bit of daylight, and I was able to dissolve all the surface level layers that were there, and was able to sit with myself in the darkness for 3 days. Nervous system completely relaxed, and in that place, my mind was able to relax also, because it allowed the light, which creates a reflection, to dissipate, and all that was left was just the darkness, which was really peaceful.
Yeah, how fun. I mean, from a Taoist perspective, but when we're looking at personality, I mean, you guys all have a lot of study over me from a clinical perspective, but always what helps me, quite often, when we look at the Shen and the way the mind is expressed, so that's where the mind, it falls into this expanded area from the Taoist three treasure system. The way we see it, of course, is through the personality and the mannerisms. And so one of the goals to refine the personality into absolute uniqueness. And so when I'm working with someone in much more of a general level, I'll know, like I'll scratch under the surface a little bit to really find whether they really get the sense that their mannerisms and their personality is feeling unique, and it's feeling like a unique expression of what I communicate, you know, in sense of like in the void, there's a particular part of the love of the void that you're really, you know, really sitting in right now. And do you feel you're expressing that in the unique way that is, you know, that it deserves? Or do you feel like you're still picking up a lot of mannerisms from groups you're a part of? Is there a group think there? And quite often that question's like, that brings out whether you really do need to focus on that area or not. And yeah, it's really confronting, I'm sure, as you all know, but just a reminder that that's a good yeah, very practical question that you can throw out there.
Thank you. I'm just a bit aware of time and everyone's afternoon, and just wanted to raise if there's any questions that people have about today, that this is be an opportunity to raise your hands this time.
All right, so Alan is going to hopefully get you.
I am here.
You're here. Good. Can we get Steve up? And
Steve, how are you?
Yeah, Steve's
right,
got
so
a video on.
So Mario, can we stop sharing your screen?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then Steve, I'm going to spotlight you. How about that?
Steve.
And there we go. Fire away, Steve.
Heartening to hear you guys talk about integration. That was a lot to take in a short period of time, but overall I was very heartened to hear about integration, and some of the things you're saying. I think that the psychedelic experience is the thing that opens that crack, gets people out of their head and into the life, the spiritual life process. And for me, integration, we hear a lot about integration after a psychedelic experience, whether it's through psychedelic-assisted therapy or people doing things at home. But integration after, to me, is not something that you do with 6 sessions or whatever. It's opened you up to a life process. You have to, as you're saying, Mario, we have to offer people some containment. And Mason, you were talking about linking them up to hope. This is a process that you guys are in, and it's a long term. It's going on for the whole of your life. And I think, I mean, I'm a psychedelic ranger from the 60s and 70s, and I saw the loss of a lot of very good souls that got lost on that thing. And I'm concerned that out of this process, we put people through psychedelic experiences, there's a risk of them getting lost. They really need help and resources to continue to tune into the whole life process. And I'm not sure that we've got enough of that for the people coming through. I'm wondering what you guys think about that.
I mean, yeah, getting lost. I talk about it a lot, like that getting lost, and how we are in a beautiful phase of bringing back. You know, we've had such an extreme boom in civilization, and the structures have been on that orange spectrum of hierarchy. And you know, whether we had to go through the Industrial Revolution and etc. for whatever's going on in the cosmic sphere, but now we're seeing the wisdom come back in, the psychedelics come back in. Even in the wellness world, I talk about getting lost, the amount of people that lose themselves in the orthorexia of veganism and carnivore, so on and so forth. I talk about it a lot, and I just feel like it is a part of we're just finding our feet in how to bring these into a community and into a world that has such rigid institutions that are so scared of knowing that the power is, you know, that it's a long-term thing. We can't just give people the pill and they're going to get healed. I think that's almost too much for some people to integrate, that hey, you need to slow down. You're never going to fix the world, and you're never going to fix all these people. And this is on them to learn this skill, this slow skill that is the most important one, to have them land as, you know, as elders, as I often call it, to be integrated and not get lost along the way, and not get the opportunity to arrive at their destiny in a real smooth manner. And I think that's confronting because yes, sometimes there's silver bullets, as we know, in the sense of someone had this intense trauma and they have a plant medicine. It's like, oh my gosh, this is miraculous. But most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's a little insight, as you said, and then you got to get to work. And I think it's confronting, because a lot of people don't make it. And so when you face that, you face the almost beautiful savage reality of the world that we live in and the universe that we're in. And that's what I've been feeling I'm bringing to the conversation a lot. And I've had to face it in myself a lot. You might not make it, mate. I might not make it in certain areas, but and that's okay.
Yeah, well, we're selling so to the powers that be, we're selling psychedelics as symptom alleviation. They're buying into it for that, and we've got to hang on to that to get through. But then how do we piggyback all the other deeper spiritual integration into that? How do we sort of get that into the process? That's what I'm wondering.
I'm addressing the very thing at the moment, Steve. Because I feel that the overwhelm of the problem that's out there. And to that, before I give a solution that I'm offering, if we look at the groundwork's already been done, I feel, out there. We've already got the psychedelic movements that's kind of been existing from the 60s and even earlier, with the development of research, but also information and foundational programs to be able to support people through that. And they've been just sitting there in the background, waiting for the right time for them to erupt. And if we look at more on a esoteric level, I talked about the last 2,000 years of more patriarchal, more in our minds, now coming more into our bodies, and that's also been mimicked in a lot of the indigenous traditions, where there's been a passing on of the baton per se from the men to the women.
Oh, lost Mario. I'm not sure what his point was going to be there, Steve, but I honestly think like we're doing it. So the amount of people within these really rigid institutions that know that there's a particular aspect of the knowledge that they're not going to get there. It's happening within psychology, obviously. It's like the amount that, the meditation and connection to people's own spirit has emerged through, like, if you go and study psychology at university, I just wouldn't, the way it was when I was going through uni, you just never would have suspected it. And even in modern medicine, there's people using these techniques in oncology departments now. I know there's medicinal mushrooms being used in oncology, and it's happening because the infiltration of mycelium, I call us weeds in a good way. These monocrops of institutions don't realize they need good wheat, like robust dandelions growing in there. They try and pick it out, but it gets overwhelmed and it nourishes the soil. Likewise, the mycelium, we grow underneath these institutions and grow up into them. And it's not an infiltration because they're wrong, but it's just a coming back into harmony. I think we're doing it, and I think we just need to keep on stumbling our way through, and we'll get there.
Well, thanks to Mind Medicine for the very difficult and delicate balancing act.
Appreciate it, Steve. We'll keep on fighting. All right. Are there any more questions before we start wrapping up?
No hands up. Many people don't know. There's one.
Mario.
Oh, hey, Mario. Good. You got a question, Mario? Anyone? You with us again? You're on mute, mate. I'm just gonna get you to unmute.
Okay. Hello. I just wanted to just mention that last bit. There's been a transition that's occurred from the masculine to the feminine, and so the aspect of the embodiment. I don't think I agree, Steve. I agree with that. I don't think we're ready. As a world, I don't think we'll ever be ready. It's almost one of those things. The wave needs to come first, and we just have to ride the wave and go forward with it, because we've got a lot of catching up to do and a lot of learning to do at a very rapid pace. But I believe in the human resilience and the human capacity to do so. And I think that's what excites me about this, is the unknown, because it comes back to the aspect of the void. It's like, it's the unknown that's awaiting us. because ultimately it's a spiritual awakening that's going to come through. And if we do things slowly with putting all the things in place, we'll get there more safely. But I feel we have enough traction and enough resources, say in a place like Australia with a lot of practices and awareness, that movement will come through with hiccups, lots of hiccups, but it'll come through. And I believe in the human condition, the human spirit to come through it. And I'm excited by that because I feel like there's a collective awakening that's kind of being called for this. And for many of us, we've kind of been waiting for support because we've been doing it without support. But that time has been cultivation time. I, for myself, I've got my website's worlddoctor.com. I've working on these programs to be able to do my part, as many people also out there doing their parts, to help that transition and that transformation to occur. So in my programs, I run everything from the therapeutics of transforming the densities of emotion, bringing together with the breath work to open the container, density to move through body work and through yoga, and moving the fascias, acupuncture to get everything flowing through, ice bath to activate the adrenals and the vedic systems. All these things are already available to us, but it's a matter of becoming now not only aware, but also starting to engage. By the very nature, once somebody takes a psychedelic journey, they're going to have opened up a doorway, and they can't shut that doorway again. They have to find their way back home. And that finding the way back home is, I think, one of the most amazing journeys that awaits a human. That aspect of the walking through the dark night of the soul, the aspect of the hero's journey, that aspect of arising beyond ourselves to actually step into who we are.
There's two questions there. I don't know if we've got time for it. One, is there a local rehab going on board with the legal psilocybin? I mean, I'd probably say it's probably safe to say not in Australia just yet. So most people are going in abroad to go to these like rehab retreats. But am I right in saying that, especially to Netherlands and?
Yeah. So on our website, we have a list of legal psychedelic centers which are listed around the world, and we've actually broken them down according to their substance, whether it's psilocybin and ayahuasca, etc. I'll try actually put the chat in the. Sorry, I will put the link in the chat for that page. In terms of just where things are at, from our perspective, Australia is going to really just focus on getting these treatments rolled out from a clinical perspective first. It will be quite a while until retreats are going to be permitted here, just because the TGA are really restricting these just to psychiatrists at the moment, and it's just very hard at the moment.
Okay, I mean, there's another practical question there about cold plunge and acupuncture, whether you should you do them together and in which order. Yeah, like I think you can really. Acupuncture is something that I like doing perpetually. It's nice if you can find a classical acupuncturist who isn't going to look at you in Western terminology. That's one thing to realize that in the 50s, Chinese medicine got self-colonized and became a new type of medicine, which is under the context of Western anatomy, with, keeping a couple of the surface level concepts of qi and yin yang in the channels. And so remember, classical is connected to the source of Chinese medicine and actually has the capacity to treat severe cases and likewise actually help you cultivate. So find someone classical, do that all the time, but lower the amount of time that you need to go. So your own practice helps you do that. And so you can just make it every quarter or something like that, ideally. And then cold plunge. I mean, I like looking at cold plunge therapeutically. I don't like, I think especially as much as if you're resistant to it, do it for as long as then you're 100% you're going to be able to get through that cold plunge. And then I don't really feel like you need them that often. Likewise, you can just do them every now and then just to make sure that you're, still connected to your body and your breath enough to move through something like that. I prefer doing cold plunging in like wild places. So if you can go on adventures that take you to places where the water's extremely cold, that has ruined cold pools like for me. And that's, I think as it should be. But if you like, I've got a lot of friends who are like mentally, they're doing all these other things as well, and that ice baths save them somehow. I've never been in that position, so if it's feeling therapeutic, just keep on going.
All right, we're going to wrap it up here. Elizabeth.
Great.
Time has definitely gone. Nicole, if you wanted to do final comments.
Oh, just want to thank Mason and Dr. Mario so much for all that wisdom and calm and focused advice. It was making me sit back in my seat and go, yeah, I need to just really embody myself today and and every day. So thanks again. And there was so much there. So if anyone else, there's a few comments coming in now, but if there's any more queries from anybody, please contact us at My Medicine Australia. We've put some information in the chat and we can then pass on your information to Mason and Dr. Mario or directly to each of these practitioners. So thanks again. And we look forward to welcoming you again. And thanks again. Have a great day.